So here on Kido Butai, let's see whether we can play it correctly. That's always one of the issues. Okay, you know, it's a game I just learned, and well, we'll see. We've got the setup in place. Japanese player gets to go first. Now, I can launch planes at Midway right away. That does not seem like a bad choice. And these will be the normal bombers as opposed to the dive bombers. I'm sorry. We got normal and torpedo. These will be the dive bomb. What confuses me I remember seeing that somewhere where Midway can only be attacked by one type and the other by the other. And I don't know where that is, but that doesn't seem historically accurate if I have read that right. So I'm going to have to look through the rules again to see what kind of bombers I'm supposed to send. I don't know how much difference it makes, but where I was looking, actually, the first place I looked at as soon as I turned the camera off. Only bomber squadrons on their bomb sides may attack the base, and only bombers on their torpedo side may attack the carrier. Now, the Japanese certainly use dive bombers against the carriers, and I'm not quite sure what the reason for that is. But I see no reason, I can't read these counters. Okay, that says torpedo on the back. I see no reason not to send the whole force of bombers out this way. And how many of my fighters? Well, you know, I'm not going to have to fly cap because there's, as I see it, there's no risk. There's absolutely no risk. The U.S. can't catch me until the third turn anyway. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll get caught with my pants down. That'll be interesting. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not limited to launching. I may end up trying to recycle my planes at the moment when they come back, but I want everything going out. And then they get rotated southward that way. So these guys are heading there. This is my action. Mutual reconnaissance. Okay. Unfortunately, I only have the same color die. I'll roll for the US. They do not find me. And the Japanese. I have found the US carriers. What's the Japanese and American? I know the rule, I just don't know how to find it. And what I'm looking for is to see whether or not I start drawing right now. Okay. Maybe I'm gonna go away so that I can try to find this ship. I can't find it here. It may be in the example of play. It probably is. That's pretty complete. But this is what bugs me, is I know it's somewhere else. Well, I see somewhere the Japanese attack on a reported American reveals that a second U.S. fleet is around. C6. Okay. So somewhere in the combat rules, we're going to have this. If you attack an American fleet. Okay, so I've discovered the U.S. fleet, but I don't know what it is yet. So I don't start drawing from the cup. I thought I'd start drawing already. I don't know what the fleet is until I actually get planes to it, I guess. Right? Not absolutely clear that that happens once I get there. Probably cleared up in the example of play. I don't like reading examples of play, And I feel like I'm making a pretty good guess here, so I'm not going to go look for that. All right, where are we? The example of play is better than the rules, which, of course, disturbs me. But not as complete. You need them both, is basically what it comes down to, and that bugs me. So I've sent my planes out. I've reconned. It's not turn 3, so the U.S. can't attack. My planes cannot attack because they haven't reached their target. Now, when do they reach their target? It takes me 2 more turns. 1 to fly to the target, rotating southward, and then 1 more to attack. Remember, I can only do 1 action at a time with each plane. So, I think I'm done with the first turn. Now, I've committed everything over to the Midway. This is probably a mistake. I probably should keep planes on board to deal with not just Cap, but what if I find the U.S. fleet, which I just did, but I sent my planes up. Damn. Okay. So we go to the second turn, and we turn these all southward to indicate that they're getting close to target. We do the recon. I just recon for the U.S. because the Japanese cannot. They have found me. That means on turn 3 they're going to be able to attack me, and I am stripped bare. Oh, this is terrible. We may have to try again. Okay. So the Americans can't launch an attack because it's turn 2. I cannot attack yet because I haven't made it. So we go to another turn. All right. And we have reached, which means we're going to be attacking. Now, that doesn't happen, I think. Oh, no, that happens immediately. All right. So we look for American fighter planes protecting this. There are no fighters protecting it. That, I believe, goes right back in the cup. And that means all my bombers come in. Okay. I am not attacking a carrier, so there's no anti-air combat. So... I roll a die. I need a 6 against Midway for each hit. No, 2 hits does it. Now I have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dice to roll. I got it. All right, so Midway's been destroyed. That has taken down 3 planes. So these will disappear as they become eligible to return, as they start flying back to base. Right now, I guess it's assumed all the planes are up in the air. Okay. Now, wait a minute. Did that shit go right back in the cup? Or does it get delayed? Randomly draw 1 counter from the fleet pool. God, I hate... I really hate procedural rules, and if you're going to do them, don't do them as text. Do them as a flow chart. Okay. Your bombers can attack, so I've got to try to find where I draw the fighters. Any American carriers when the dummy... Yeah, that's the ships. Okay, so this is that weird rule, check the box by how many, if any, fighter squadrons are protected. So what we don't know is whether or not that shit was supposed to go in here or go onto the delay. I don't want to hunt through the rules. They're not very big, but man, they are painful to keep hunting through for this kind of piece of information, which probably is only in the example of play. I don't see where the chit goes back in the cup or not. I know some places it calls out specific things, like if you destroy a plane, you take some chits out, some of the missed chits. Anyway, so we just destroyed that. 3 planes are due to die. I've got to keep track of that somehow. It hasn't been accounted for yet, but it can't until they come back. This is turn 3. We've got recognition. The Americans. Are the Americans bombing me? I got something I can't read, and I can't show you with that. It looks like it's a bomber. Okay. Which means I keep drawing. Okay. So 1 bomber came out. Now, again, I don't know what happens with that chit. If there's Japanese cap, there is not. So we don't know whether these are torpedo or dive bombers because there's no cap. Maybe it explains here. If it is a dummy, no attack. If it is bombers, keep drawing. All drawn bombers. If an attack occurs, apply the same procedure to the fighter pool. There's 1 fighter. All the fighters went with this 1 bomber. What the hell? Okay, so we sent 2 of our, what, 5 fighters or something out with this bomber. Okay. Okay, so it doesn't say what to do with the dummies. Again. Yeah, nowhere. Hold on. Both its counter and the 2 dummies. Okay, so I think the dummies are going to return anyway. So what's the return cycle for... this is only in the example of play again. It's not in the rolls. So we've got a dummy fighter here too, which I think probably also should have been handled the same way, even though there's no hint about that, I don't think. I don't know. I gotta spend some more time reading these rules to try to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do with this. But these are gonna return when the bombers return. This, I don't know. There's just, you know, screw it. There's no rules on it and it's going in. Okay. And yeah, you know that I'm not very tolerant of rules that don't succeed in their purpose. Okay. So now we're back to the bombing. Doesn't matter what we are. We're assigned to carriers in the following way. The first one goes after the Akagi. Well, there's only 1. Okay. And it hits on... Okay, Japanese anti-aircraft fire hits on a 6. Japanese do not. If they were US, they would. It's unprotected. Well, it doesn't matter that it's the Akagi. I roll a die and this is how many hits I get. I hit 5. I'm going to assign them the way I would the actual hits. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There goes the Akagi. That's got to be accounted for with planes coming in lost. These guys, yeah, this is not good. These guys go back where? 5 hours ahead on the game track, including these. And that's when they'll be available. All right. Well, there goes my fleet. Probably should have kept a cap. One bomber took me out. Okay. It's not just one plane, obviously. But. And that puts us to nothing. I think end of turn. So we'll go here, and we'll take a little break because this is kind of frustrating me. Okay, so things are not going very well for our Japanese, mainly because I don't know what I'm doing. But so we go to our phase. Now, at this point, we're going to be fly attacking squadrons from the center to the target, attacking squadrons that have reached. After the attack, they are put back in the center of the map and are rotated westward. That's what we didn't do. So they're heading home. To the west? Yeah. Okay. Land on carriers from the center. So this happened last time where they got rotated. Now I'm going to land, and all of these are rotated northward. So, and obviously, I got some planes to ditch. Okay. So I lost the Akagi, which holds 4. Basically, I have 4 planes I can carry. That's it. So I'll take 2 fighters and 2 bombers. And I did this horribly, as you can see. Losing my carriers was not a good idea. Okay. Oops. Mutual reconnaissance. I still haven't hit a U.S. carrier, so I don't know what their forces are disposed as. For the Americans, well, there's still a lot of bombers out there that could be hitting us. And all my planes are on deck, which can't be good. All right, we got... This looks like a bomber. Okay. That means we keep trying. But it's probably all over here. Okay, we're out of bombers here, so that stays. Did we send any fighter cover with these? This is important because the recycle rates require that we deal with these. Speaking of which, some of these planes aren't going home. We got a fighter. Oh, that's the wrong kind of fighter. We found a carrier. Alright. No fighter. Alright, so this is coming in. There's nothing I can do about it with no cap, and you're not really seeing the full game in action. I'll play it again. And on a 6 we deflect that. We do not. So now it gets to roll and do 2 points of damage, which is boom, boom. There goes 2 more of my carriers. And then these will be coming in over here. Uh-oh. But I can already see this is not going to be an easy game to win for the Japanese. And, you know, historically, the Japanese, at least there's a tale about this, wargamed Midway. And they came up with results which were a little worse than the historical, I think. But which were very bad. Their carrier force was getting mauled. And they decided something's wrong with their model. So they resurrected their carriers and continued on. If you could do that in real life. Okay. So I think that's all we got there. And we go to another turn. And I'm on the Japanese phase. At this point, I'm making my squadrons ready for action. Well, I have a bomber. That's it. And by the way, where I position my planes could be of some importance because I know the attacks will always come in this order, which I think is kind of cheesy. But okay. No recon required. U.S. Are they bombing us? Still no cap up. You can see, you still, you know, this game may be simple, but it still covers some of the factors like you know, the refresh rate for the planes. It seems a little slow. Okay, what's this? No bomber. That goes back in the cup and doesn't cause any issues. And that means we're done with the turn because the U.S. is last. Now I can launch an attack. Well, with nothing but a bomber, let's go find the U.S. ships. Okay. Now for the Americans, still no bombers flying. Pushes us forward. Now we fly to the target, and that means we have to face southward. Okay, so we've made it to target, but we're still not attacking. The U.S. draws, and you can see it's a pretty quick game. And I keep drawing this this no bombers. I can't read it, the stupid chopstick thing. The font. So that pushes us forward, and look, the U.S. has recovered their planes. And if I can read what's what, these are fighters, I think. They've recovered their planes and they're ready for more action. My Japanese plane is coming in. All right. And I may not have it the right way. This is a bomber. It should be a torpedo. So, what did I find? Well, we draw one U.S. carrier. Oh, fuck. I forgot about those. Son of a bitch. Yeah, I gotta fish some things out that weren't able to land. Okay, so that's the Yorktown. Now we put the no carrier chit in here so that the U.S. can split into two task forces. We shake it around. We get another carrier. We shake around because I could see. All right, all three U.S. carriers are in one place. This didn't have effect. With all the carriers together, you'd think I have some cap. Let me go back because this is important. I had 3 fighters and a bomber. Hold on. So we fixed the cups. We pull out a fighter and both 2 fighters and a bomber. There were 2 fighters and a bomber, not 3. And corresponding markers, I guess. See, what's weird here is for each American squadron shot down, 1 fighter dummy is also taken out of the game. I don't think that's the case with the bombers. I don't think that's the case here. I don't see any indication that you remove these here. So I've pulled them out, but because there's no landing space, I guess maybe it's going to be easier for the U.S. not to have cap over their carriers or something because Midway's been knocked out. Who knows? They could use Midway as a launch place for that. So it does make some sense. But all right, so now I draw for my fighter cover. And look, no cap. Too bad for the Americans, huh? Well, I pick one of the ships that I'm going after. And on a 5 or a 6, it drives my bomber away. It does not, so now I roll a die and I get this many hits. Oh look, 6 hits. I killed 3 U.S. carrier. Oh boy, game over there. But it's not completely over until it's all done. I've destroyed everything the U.S. has, but their planes are still up. They can take out my last carrier, and then we'll count up the points. But basically, everything's been destroyed. Speaking of which, let's see if the U.S. bomber shows up. Why are these here? Oh, that was a second strike. Okay. Looks like we have bombers. We have no cap, so we don't really have to worry. Looks like we have plenty of bombers going after my one little tiny remaining carrier. and no fighter cover. You know, I don't think I'm going to play another one. I think I'm seeing enough here in this part to understand what's going on. Okay, so 6s I need to hit, and I get, I guess, 4 shots. All right, so I didn't get any. They have at least one plane. It will get a 1, and it will sink my last carrier. Everything's dead. Time to score that. Okay, well, every second enemy squadron destroyed is worth half a point. That means they're worth a quarter point each. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 3. Looks like the Japanese are worth 4 for that. Let's keep this here. Took foreign losses. The U.S., you know, I can add these up an easier way. I can find my carriers, which are worth 12, and Midway puts it to 15. 15 squadrons total. Half of that would be 8. Half of that would be 4, so that's 4 points gone from the U.S. I think we should be pretty close. Carriers sunk. 2 points for the Soryu and Hiryu, 3 for the Akagi and Kaga. So that's 10 points that the Japanese lost here. The U.S. carriers are worth 3 points each, so that's 12, and a 13th point, right? No, 9, and a 10th point for Midway. And not surprisingly, when everything's wiped out, we have a tie. All right, so I was very worried that I wouldn't see enough of the game to be able to judge it all well based on the, oh, hey, I got caught with my pants down right away. I did some stupid things. I shouldn't have launched against Midway. It's a minor target. Sending half my force, which is what the playthrough does, is a much more reasonable amount. That way I can keep some cap up. I can, if I find U.S. carriers, I can hunt them down. So I thought this would be pretty unreasonable in terms of what it shows me about the game. But you know what? I think the U.S. player played stupidly enough, the AI as it were, played stupidly enough that I can see that, wow, this AI is really, really dumb. I was hoping maybe there would be something cool baked into the chits or something, but I don't see much hope for that when, you know, you might end up, oh look, no cap. Am I playing something wrong? That's possible. That's always possible. It all comes down to this check with the U.S. fighter box by how many, if any, fighter squadrons it is protected. But over here it does explain, or it does go through an example which looks like I'm doing it right. The rules obviously aren't explicit enough to handle it. It's kind of a shame we're breaking this into 3 videos. It's about an hour and a half total coverage, but you know, that's a little long, and yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to do the review at the end of this one. Now that I'm no longer, you know, posting in some other places that I used to, Board Game Geek, I'm no longer on, nobody really is 2D6, which was kind of a cool idea, but it's like, you know, the people who are looking for it on my forum, the Game Box, are people who are used to my style and probably don't mind if I go back to the older version. So I'll come back with the review and just tack that on at the end of this. Kido Butai. All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of words on this. I think between the rules explanation and the playthrough, there's plenty to see of what the game is like. But first of all, obviously, this is not my type of game. I knew that, you know, when I accepted to do it, and the main consideration that got me to do it was, hey, small company, any exposure is probably positive. So even if I don't like it, I think people will see something they do like. And what's negative for me? Well, one, it's solo design. Two, it's fairly small, and three, it's about World War II. On the other hand, it's about Midway, and I think Midway is a really exciting topic for handling a carrier. I think the carrier dual concept is really interesting, and one that's tough to pull off right. I think the old Avalon Hill Midway kind of does it right at some high level, an abstract type of game, but it feels kind of like you're playing Battleship. This one, well, like all solitaire games, it comes down to figuring out what to do, figuring out how to optimize your chances of winning, essentially. At least that's the way I play it, and it becomes really an exercise in probability and calculating that probability. And then, luck comes into it. And hard solo games, there's a couple different ways a solo game can be hard. It can be hard in the sense that it's just hard to win. Even if you optimize yourself, you can't. You maybe have a 20-30% chance of winning. I feel like that's the route Victory Point Games goes. That's somewhat dissatisfying, but it means that every time you play, you never have a, gee, I'm sure to win, type of strategy. I can't tell you that this one manages that. This one actually seems to be very, very luck dependent, because you're pulling, you could take a big gamble and it could just pay off. The U.S. planes might not have found you, and they might not be capping over the carrier. Alternatively, though, conceivably you could do everything kind of right, which I sure the hell didn't do, and send your initial strike at the Midway Island, hope to knock it out, but you don't guarantee anything because you're only sending part of your planes. Keep another force in case you get a lucky break on the U.S. early, and even if you don't, you want to have cap, because whatever they send, you probably can't drive off otherwise. We didn't really get to see the choice between, hey, wow, we got torpedo bombers coming in. Do I want to use my cap on them, or do I want to leave it open? But I think honestly, you at least want to use some of your cap on them, no matter what. You want to prevent them from getting through it, because planes that get through with no cap at all in place are just too potent. They take out your entire fleet. But we saw the ridiculous happen, right? The U.S. sent their entire flight group out, assuming that they hadn't been found or whatever. Didn't bother to maintain any planes above the carriers for cap. And, they played as stupidly as I do. And I guess that's really the big flaw that I see here, is that, when I'm looking at a solitaire game, the question is how believable. So one question is, how hard is it to win, which I already kind of touched on. This one, I think, is kind of random in that. So what is the saving grace for that randomness? How believable is the story that it tells? And it's kind of hard to believe that I was as stupid as I was. But, I'm learning the system, but that the game's AI did something so dumb as well. I mean, my stupidity is kind of acceptable, and probably wouldn't happen again if I play it again. When the game is giving you results that goofy, it's kind of hard to have to maintain that suspension of disbelief, Yeah, okay. But on the other hand, it's not an entirely ridiculous strategy to send everything out if you absolutely know you haven't been found. And that's kind of an interesting thing. So like in Midway, in the Avalon Hill game, you know whether or not the other guys found you. Theoretically, you shouldn't. All the time, right? Like, first of all, whatever search planes are going probably aren't going to expose themselves fully. Which means you might see a search plane turn and leave, and maybe it didn't see you. You might not see the search plane that sees you. And a number of other opportunities where, yeah, most of the time it'll follow what the game does, but it won't usually be so random. So now, if the U.S. hasn't seen any sign of Japanese planes flying in their area, well, maybe it is worth sending the whole force. So you can do a little bit of, you know, reaching and come up with an explanation for why it happened the way it did. But it does sort of bother me that way. Components are functional. You got a little, the little board does what it should. It would be nice if it had a little bit more information on it. Maybe separate boxes to move things to. There's too much of the, yeah, point the counters this way, point the counters this way, where you have to look it all up, where if that information was presented on the board, either through just some kind of graphic explanation of what you should be doing, or maybe some actual little boxes, because there's plenty of room in the center of the board that could be divided up, and maybe if there was less on the main, on the graphics of the chopstick font, which I just do not like. But yeah, maybe I don't hate it that much, but it's hard to read, especially on the counters. The count, okay, so that's the other thing. The counters, for my eyes and the lighting, the dark colors, the dark print on them, they kind of didn't read terribly well, and they weren't very distinguishable between different counters. The rule book is not good. It's not horrible because it's so tiny, but there were a couple of places in the rules where I couldn't figure out what the hell the designer's talking about. Is that shocking? Not with me, but, you know, I think it was a little worse than one would expect. But there's a pretty good example of play, I would say a very good example of play, that pretty much answered all the questions I had. Relying on an example of play that way, though, is problematic because you kind of have to dig through it, the entire example, to find the place where it covers what you're interested in. And maybe it doesn't cover it. And that's kind of the feeling I had with the rules, too, is I had a hard time working through the organization. Now, like the old Avalon Hill Classics, you know, it's 1, 2, 3, call it 4 pages of rules, you know, and fairly small. It doesn't take up a lot of room, so you can get away with that kind of sloppiness. But it isn't necessary. You know, the rules could have been condensed and presented in just as procedural a format, but very, very sparsely, and I think given the information better and both more effectively and more accurately. Especially if you're going to rely on the example of play to actually, you know, clear up the rules. Because there's a tendency in the wording to say things in ways that aren't necessarily very clear. Alternatively, about the same size rule book could have been used a little less procedurally, same amount of wordiness, but with a little bit of the idea of what you're doing and why, a little bit more than I'm seeing here. I don't think it's terrible in that direction. So I don't know. Anyway, overall assessment, you know, if you're into this kind of thing, it's a story that hasn't been told very well in a small solitaire game. You know, you have Carrier, which handles this well enough solitaire, but man, you know, this is something you could take on an airplane and play. This is something you could play at the coffee shop. It's a good time killer in that sense, I guess. You know, I mean, if it's an alternative between this and playing a hand of solitaire, and that's really not far from what it is in terms of the time level. It says 60 minutes. I don't think if you know what you're doing that it's going to take 60 minutes. I think it might. I mean, you have to realize I didn't use up, I used maybe half the game. But
that's pretty much my impression. Obviously, again, not something that that I'm likely to play very often, you know, because quite honestly, you know, if I'm on an airplane, I find something else to do. I don't really have that interest in like playing a solo game. If I'm at a coffee shop, if I'm going to bring a game, I'm going to bring something that I'm going to be playing with someone else probably. But that's just, you know, that's just personal taste here. I can certainly see, I knew a guy who used to sit in our gaming club, and he'd have, you know, something moderate size or smaller that he'd be playing solo all the time. And just kind of hanging out with the rest of us, smoking his cigarettes and chatting and everything. And, you know, whatever. I would rather just be chatting than playing a game during that, but you know, what it did was he was waiting for people to come to chat, and he'd have a game set up and be playing it in between classes or whatever. And you know, if people didn't show up, he had something to do. If people showed up, well, he could still do it while they were there and enjoy the social experience. Anyway, at least this is not a very expensive game, so you know, if you do need a time killer or you want something on this story, it's not an unreasonable choice.